An M&A process, particularly for a seller in the sort of deals we work on, sort of the 5 to 100 million range, is probably one of the biggest things they're going to do in their life, if not the biggest. And so you need to work with people that are going to give you honest advice, going to tell you how it is, but do the absolute best they can for you to deliver the best outcome for you. And so it's all about the people.
Success in any career isn't just about job titles or milestones. It's about consistency, resilience, and the ability to create opportunities when others don't. In M&A, it's taken to a whole different level. It's a high-pressured, fast-paced environment where only very few make it to the top. Today's guest is one of them. Nick Wallis, partner and head of corporate finance at Gerald Edelman, has built a multi-award-winning team and has established himself as a well-renowned figure in the mid-market advisory space. In today's episode, we'll learn about what success has looked like for Nick and what others can take away from his journey. Nick, brilliant to have you on Talent at the Top. Welcome. How are you doing? All okay?
Very good, yeah. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. Let's jump straight in. You've risen through the ranks quickly in your M&A career. You joined Gerald Edelman in 2019, and it's fair to say at the time it was probably a less known M&A entity to now a multi-award-winning team. From an outsider looking in, not only have you built a really successful team, but clearly a successful career. My first question to you then is, how would you define success for yourself?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think the start of my career, success was always going to be partner at PwC. When I started, that was where I wanted to be. When I look back now, I think we've got a team of 30 plus people who have largely taken a risk on me and my vision. And I think that for me defines the success. I've got a team of people who are brilliant, who love what they do and are really good at what they do, are happy in work. And that for me is success. The awards are great. And, having the Corporate Finance Team of the Year award last year is sort of helps to shape that success in our heads, because it's credit to the team for being able to win that award. But I think when I look at the team, that's really what defines the success, having that team of people.
It's almost interesting that what success might have looked like for you at the start of your career is different to what success is for you now. Has there been a time in your career where you thought, I'm not sure if success is going to come my way?
I think you always have doubts as you go through different periods of your career. There was a time when my idea of success changed when I decided to move on from PwC, which was, as I say, the idea of success was growing through the ranks there. And that was a risk in itself, moving to a sort of a boutique corporate finance firm. Always a question mark, is that going to work out? Yeah. How's that going to be in terms of my career? What impact's it going to have? Similarly, when I moved to Gerald Edelman to effectively start up a corporate finance function, there was always an element of doubt as to, is this going to work? Will this be successful? But I've always had confidence in myself, or I've always only done things once I've had enough confidence in myself that I thought it would work. So I sort of backed myself to know that it wouldn't be a disaster. But yes, there's always been doubts, probably at both of those times in my career when I've made the big moves, where I've sort of doubted it more than ever. But within a short period of time afterwards, when I've realised that I had the confidence that it would work out.
Right. And we'll definitely talk about that journey, because I think there's a lot of people that can relate to the journey, or would like to relate to the journey that you've gone through in your career, Big Four, boutique, etc. In terms of yourself as a leader, what traits did you feel like you had to work on in order to build a successful career in M&A?
I think the biggest skill, the most important skill in M&A generally is communication. I think you have to be technical, you have to be good at project management, but it's about the people skills, the communication skills. I think that's the key thing. You can have a job in audit or in TS, and that's kind of where my background lies, where technical skills are probably more important. But in M&A, it's about managing the process and being able to communicate with lots of different stakeholders at lots of different times. And that's the bit I learned very quickly in the first part of my M&A journey, or my corporate finance journey. You've got your client. If I'm working for a seller, for example, I've got my client, and they may have a few different stakeholders. They might have the shareholders, they might have the management team, they might have the finance team. They've got their advisors, they've got a tax advisor, a lawyer. Then you're speaking to X number of buyers. Each of those has got their own advisors, different management teams. You're liaising with lots of due diligence providers along the journey as well. You've got both sets of lawyers. So it's all about project management, but being able to communicate effectively to all different parties in a deal. But that also works in your own team as well. Being able to communicate upwards, communicate downwards. M&A can be hard work. There can be conflicting deadlines. So being able to manage that, prioritize, knowing what's more important. You've got a deal that's completing next week. That's going to be more important than a deal that is completing in 4 weeks. So you can prioritize that, but you've got to make sure that you're communicating that to the other parties, and that you're doing enough to keep it moving. And that's why communication, I think, is so important. And actually, we've seen the people in my team and in other teams in M&A where they've been successful. I think communication is a big part of that. And actually, the flip side also, is the same, where people that aren't necessarily as good at communication haven't necessarily had the best careers or haven't developed perhaps as quickly because they get stuck on tasks and a bit too technical. And those skills are important, don't get me wrong, but actually I think the communication bit just brings it all together.
Did you always have that? Did you always have that communication ability, skill set?
I think so. I'd like to think so anyway. I've had to work at it, of course. And I think that, the PwC grounding, I think, helped because you're always giving feedback on projects. Even back in the audit days, you're always encouraged to give feedback upwards and downwards. You're always encouraged to communicate and talk to people. And it was I was in a sort of what you call the North London office. So it was a bit of a smaller environment, albeit PwC was 20,000 plus people. My office was 250 people. So everyone knew each other, and I was a bit more encouraged to talk and socials and drinks, and I felt like I was quite good at that. And there's an element of playing the game, in any organisation. If you want something, you've got to talk about it. You've got to tell people you want something. That's part of communication, and don't just expect things to come to you. So I think I learned it quite early in my career, but I've definitely built on it and encouraged others to do it as well. I had a conversation with someone in my team the other day about his progression, and he was quite honest with me about what he was looking for, and it's great. I love that because if you don't talk about it and you're not communicating properly, I can't read people's minds about what and I can't help people develop. And so I think I'm a firm believer that communicate more rather than less.
Fine. Let's move on then. I want to go back. We have touched on PwC, you've moved to a boutique. Let's go right to the start. Did you know before you entered the professional world that you wanted to get into corporate finance? Was that something that you were genuinely looking to get into?
I had no idea what it was. I still don't really know, to be honest. It's interesting. I was at Nottingham University and did all the milk rounds and all the the graduate employers coming to meet, and I had no idea what I wanted to do. I always thought I'd probably be an accountant because my dad was an accountant, and I did finance and accounting at uni, and I was always more of a numbers person. I didn't really know what I wanted. Met all these kind of graduate employers. A few of my friends were applying to investment banks. I thought I'll do the same. I applied to a couple of investment banks, a couple of accountancy firms. Was fortunate enough to get offers from PwC and Lehman Brothers at the time, 2008.
Good timing, that.
Good timing, and or bad timing, whichever way you look at it. And thought, look, I understand accountancy. I say my dad was a partner in an accountancy firm. I didn't know much about M&A. I'll try the Lehman Brothers investment banking opportunity, and the pay was much bigger, to be honest with you. I went to Lehman in the summer of 2008, and I left on the 31st of August. They went bankrupt on the 14th of September. So that's a story in itself. But learned so much in that experience. I learned about myself. I learned about working hours and culture, but I have pretty much hated the experience, if I'm being honest. I was working 21, 22-hour days. The American banking culture wasn't for me. I struggled a lot in that period, even though it was only a 3-month period. But I liked the idea of the money, and you get rewarded. I had a job offer from Nomura, who took over Lehman in Europe, and I decided to go down the PwC route. I thought it was the safer route. I thought in my head I'd do 3 years in accountancy, and then I'll go back into the M&A world, the investment banking world, and actually really liked accountancy.
Okay.
I really liked PwC. I liked the culture. I liked the people. I didn't hate audit. A lot of people hate audit. I didn't hate audit. I didn't love audit, but I didn't hate audit. Spent nearly 5 years doing audit. But I had this itch to scratch when I was doing audit of going back into more of a finance world. And that's why I moved internally to the TS team at PwC. And I enjoyed being in the TS team. And I was involved in a lot of the modelling side of things and data side of things, as well as kind of traditional kind of TS and FDD, financial due diligence work. But I only saw one quite small part of a deal. Which is really interesting, and a lot of my deals were kind of in the FT, and that was interesting in itself, and you get a sense of gratitude from that. But I never really met an entrepreneur. I never really met a business owner. Didn't really still understand how business worked. I worked with some big private equity firms, really impressive, smart people. But I just had another itch to scratch around working with entrepreneurs, and I felt like the next step was working with entrepreneurs. It just so happened that was in M&A, and it was a natural step because I'd done TS. I had a finance background, but I didn't really, to be honest, know what it was when I moved there. I obviously had a rough idea of what M&A was. I'd done TS, but I got probably slightly fortunate in terms of, without knowing obviously nearly as much as I know now about it. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, no, I didn't always want to do M&A, but I love what I do now. I love it. I love helping clients. And I love working with different people across different organizations, different businesses, and different people, different cultures, different backgrounds.
Let's go into Big Four, audit, chartered accountant, made the move internally into transaction services. There is going to be people watching, listening to this, who are in exactly that boat at the moment. Transaction services itching to get into M&A. You did that with a move to blue box, mid-market, M&A boutique. How did you find the transition from, again, Big Four, the biggest accounting firm in the world, into a smaller M&A boutique, and also at the same time leaving transaction services and moving into something that you hadn't necessarily done properly before, the lead advisory space?
The transition to corporate finance was a bit of a culture shock. Mainly because I'd gone from 20,000 people to 15 people, or probably even less. And I remember the first day, and my printer wasn't working, and I'm so used to like going to the next printer or the next printer on the floor, because there were 25 printers on the floor, whereas we only had one. And if it didn't work, that's it, right? You can't print. And I'd been the last one to leave the office and having to lock the door behind me. You didn't have to worry about that in big organisations. So that was the culture shock that was probably more intense than the actual work itself. I think, if you work in TS, you understand how deals work, but you probably don't see the bigger picture. I started to do a bit more towards the end of my time in TS, which is why I probably had the confidence to move into M&A. But as I said before, I didn't really know what I was getting myself in for. I knew what an M&A advisor was, but didn't really know. Like, I'd seen IMs, I'd never written an IM, I'd done some modelling, but probably different purpose for much bigger organisations, much more structured around debt funding rather than kind of presenting to buyers and stuff. So it was a shock, but as I said before, corporate finance isn't particularly technical. You have to know what you're doing, but if you've got a good business brain and you're good at communication and project management, good with people, you can pick it up fairly quickly. You have to have a base level of understanding, of course. And I was never the most technical person. I always knew, particularly in TS, I always knew who the technical people were to help me, particularly on data or modelling or that sort of thing. But because I had the manager skills, I could manage people and I could sort of, take credit for all of their work. I was quite good at that. But I was never the most technical, which is why a corporate finance career sort of suited my skill set. I was good at I like to think I was quite good at the people side, the communication, the cultural stuff, but technically I was never that strong. But I think in CF you don't have to be as strong.
Yeah, I think a lot of clients of mine have said the same, is that the vast majority of transaction services professionals could probably do an M&A role on the technical side, no problem. It's the softer skills, which there are some that just don't quite have that in order to make that move into M&A. So it probably goes back to what you've said initially about the communication pieces. That's probably the difference maker between those in TS that probably are going to struggle to get into more of a lead advisory role, and those that have that communication skill that actually the transition could work well. On that point, from a recruiter's perspective, 2, 3, 4 years ago, post-COVID, I mean, the M&A market was just booming. Everyone was recruiting. And a lot of our clients, potentially you included as well, were hiring people from a TS background that wanted to make that move into M&A. Unfortunately, the opportunities are still there, but there are way less now. What could you be telling these individuals in TS looking to get into M&A? What could they be doing now to give them the best opportunity to make that move?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think understanding the deal process. I mean, I as you know, I speak to a lot of people, whether directly from audit or from TS, who want to make the move, and a lot of them very good, very technical, but don't actually really understand. To be honest, a bit like I was, didn't really understand what corporate finance is, and then particularly if you've done TS at a bigger firm where you've worked on a bit like I did on 500 million, £1 billion transactions. You've probably done a small part of a DD report rather than having an understanding of how the DD report fits into the wider deal process. And so I'd encourage people just to talk to as many M&A advisors as they can, understanding, even junior people, understanding how the M&A process works, where you fit in. It's amazing how many people I ask the question, talk me through what you think you'd be doing on a daily basis, and people don't really know. So it's having, how do you set yourself apart, basically? How do you come across better than another person that does TS? Just because you do TS doesn't mean you understand deals and M&A. Yes, you might be more technical and you might understand deals better than someone coming straight from audit or tax, for example. So it's how do you understand that? Try and get in your role involved in bidder meetings or debt meetings where you've got M&A advisors present and you can pick their brains and you can see how they work in practice. Try and get yourself involved in those sorts of conversations to really understand what it's about. So when you are talking to people that are hiring for an M&A role, you stand apart. That was probably my one piece of advice, is just get out there and talk to people, really understand what the role is, but also really understand what the role is, knowing if that's really a role you want. Yes. Because I speak to a lot of people who say, I want to do a career in corporate finance, but actually their skill set is probably more suited to TS because they're a bit more diligent and like kind of tight deadlines and project type work rather than kind of long deadlines that are quite frustrating at times and deals falling over. And, so it is a different mindset, different skill set. So people often assume, I'll go audit to TS to corporate finance. And actually that, for some, that's not the right career path.
Agreed. And I suppose it's the pool of people that want to make that move. You're mentioning a lot there about, and I think this is very beneficial for people listening and wanting to make the move into M&A, is it's more the research, the practical side of things that are going to get you ahead of people. A lot of individuals ask me, what courses could I be taking? Should I be doing the financial modelling course? Should I be doing CFA? Whereas that's not necessarily been mentioned by you there. It's more about, have you actually really understood what M&A is? You're going to meet a partner, you should be prepared and know why you want to get into the M&A space. So would you say that the CFA, financial modelling stuff, is not overly necessary?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think the technical skills you'll pick up on the job. The technical skills nailed it. I imagine a lot of people in TS, for example, will have a lot of those technical skills already. They'll understand lockboxes, they'll understand quality of earnings and working capital, and that's the kind of the more technical. The modelling stuff, yeah, great if you can do it. It's not going to put you down, but it's not a prerequisite. In my head, it's not a prerequisite. It's not going to stand you apart because within a few weeks of training, everybody could model. Some better than others, but everyone can do it. So CFA is interesting. We give people the option of doing CFA or ACA. I don't think you need to do both.
Okay.
I don't know much about the CFA because I've never done it, but
Yeah.
a few people in my team who have think it's great. ACA has some benefits, CFA has some benefits, but I don't think you need to do both. We wouldn't look at you more favourably because you've done both.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's the technical things. I think it's, as I say, it's understanding the deal, understanding what corporate finance people do, corporate finance advisors do, but also getting a bit more of a handle on some of the deals that have happened in the market, but really understanding them. Yeah. Not just saying, oh, I saw that so-and-so bought so-and-so. It's actually understanding why they bought them, what the synergies are, what the strategic rationale was, understanding as much as possible about the, if you're interviewing for Gerald Edelman or whoever it is, what deals we've worked on, and understanding why certain people we might have sold X to Y I might have been interested in X, and thinking a bit outside the box around that. Because I think ultimately, if you want to have a successful career, obviously we talked about communication, project management, but ultimately you need to find a buyer. If you're working for a seller, you need to find a buyer. So being able to think about who those buyers might be, having that strategic thinking and thought process is why I always ask people, I give them sort of a real life case study of a previous client. I say, who do you think the buyers might be for this business? And it's amazing how many people get stuck on that question.
I know.
You've probably heard that probably from a lot of people. But I think that's important as well. It's kind of technical you pick up. In my opinion, you pick up. It's that thinking outside the box. It's that making sure that you can understand why deals have happened and understand what people do.
Let's talk about the move from Blue Box to Gerald Edelman. So again, we've known each other long enough that I can always be honest with you. If I'm looking at your profile, you've been promoted to director at Blue Box, end of 2018, I want to say? No?
If you say so. Yeah,
I think
sounds
it was.
about right.
It was.
Yeah.
3 months later, you've joined Gerald Edelman as an M&A partner. I'm looking at it as Nick ready to take a partnership role, to lead a team, to be a work winner, etc., etc. I'm going to flip that question to you. Did you feel genuinely ready to take on that ownership?
It's interesting. I learned a lot at Blue Box. Had a really good experience there. I was running my own deals. It was the point that I started originating my own deals where introducers, lawyers, others, bankers, etc., were introducing opportunities to me because I'm Nick, rather than where I work, gave me the confidence that I could effectively do it myself. And when I joined Gerald Edelman, we had a couple of people that did what we called corporate finance, but it was basically the everything else department that didn't fit into one of the traditional service lines of audit or tax or accounts, etc. And it was mainly DD. No one did M&A, and actually, they would refer M&A. If a Gerald Edelman client wanted to sell, it would be referred to Blue Box or somewhere else. Yeah. But what they did have was they had clients, some, not many, but they had clients that were potentially going to sell. They had offices, they had a brand, they had IT, HR, marketing, finance. They had all the infrastructure there. So it wasn't like going to start completely from scratch, a completely new brand. Yes, they didn't have a brand in M&A, but they had a brand. Some people will have heard of Gerald Edelman. It was a firm that had been around for, at the time, 70 plus years. So that gave me confidence. The fact that I knew I would be walking in on day one and have access to thousands of clients, not that the vast majority of those were looking to sell, but there would at least be a couple. And the fact that I knew that I could originate my own work because I'd built my network. And that was one of the things I'd really focused on post leaving PwC. It was building my network. So that I had people that were referring work to me gave me the confidence. So yes, it was scary. And yes, as I said before, that was the one of the few times where I've kind of doubted whether it would work. But it was the best decision I've ever made. Other than asking my wife to marry me, she will say that. No, it's been brilliant for me, and as I said, we've grown the team to 30 plus people, and we've built a name for ourselves in that. So now people do know Gerald Edelman as a mid-market M&A advisor as well as an accountancy firm, and that's really where I wanted to get to just over 7 years on.
I want to touch on what, as part of your answer there, you said that was one of the only times that I was worried that it might not work. Why? What was it then that you were worried about?
It was because it was a bit of a risk, to be honest, and I'm not really a risk taker.
Okay.
I was basically starting up a new business.
Yeah.
with the infrastructure of an existing
Yeah.
firm that had been around for a long time. But at the start, getting clients in at the start was tricky. I had the support of the firm, which was good. There wasn't, if I'd have started up my own business completely from scratch, I'd have been funding it myself, and I didn't have the benefit of a firm, with a recurring fee base. So that gave me the security. But I didn't know it was going to work. I backed myself, but you never know with these things, and that's kind of why I think probably one of the biggest moments in my career was when that first deal completed, which was just over a year after joining. Obviously, been working on it for most of that year, but it's just before COVID, and that was the big confidence boost that actually, this can work.
This can work.
Work.
I love that. So let's talk about now the team I mentioned right at the start, award-winning team now. So last year, you won multiple awards, but you were Dealmaker of the Year at the Southeast Dealmaker Awards, and your team were Corporate Finance Team of the Year. A broader question is, what makes you and your team stand out against the competition?
You're going to sound really salesy now.
Go on, go for it.
I think it's easy to say this, but I think it's the people. Look, there's some brilliant corporate finance firms in the UK. When I started the team at Gerald Edelman, I knew that there was enough deal flow for everybody. There's some good advisors in the market. I think what sets us apart is the people. We have a very hands-on approach because we're part of an accountancy firm that has 70% of its fees recurring. We can be a bit punchier about the clients we do and don't want to work with. If we don't want to work with someone, we don't have to work with them because we've got that recurring fee base. It's not like we're scrapping for fees. So we can be a bit more selective, which means our success rates are a bit higher. It means we can give clients better service because everyone's working on less deals. But fundamentally, it's the people. And clients often ask me, or potential clients often ask me, why should I choose you over someone else? And my honest answer is, I could sit here and tell you we've got better research and we've got access to more buyers and we've got more sector knowledge. And some of those things may or may not be true, but really it comes down to the people. It's an M&A process, particularly for a seller in the sort of deals we work on, sort of the 5 to 100 million range. It's probably one of the biggest things they're going to do in their life, if not the biggest. And so you need to work with people that are going to give you honest advice, going to tell you how it is, but do the absolute best they can for you to deliver the best outcome for you. And so it's all about the people. And ultimately, it sounds very arrogant to say that, but I feel like we've got a brilliant team of people, and we deliver brilliant client service. We don't get it right all the time. But I think that's kind of what sets us apart. I know everyone would probably say that, but I think I could sit here and tell you how we've got the best, this, that, and the other. But in reality, I think it's the people.
It's the people. Well, you can sense it from the passion, the way you talk about it, is that clearly that you've built a team that you believe in properly, and you believe in the work that you're doing. Success-wise, what would that look like for you in, say, 3-5 years' time for you? It's
a good question because, as I say, I've never really had long-term other than when I said I wanted to be a partner at PwC. I've never really had a long-term objective. And having said that, we have a 3-year plan with our corporate finance team. We effectively want to double the size of the team. We want to double the revenue, not necessarily the size of the team. We want to double the revenue. I think success for me is for Gerald Edelman to be in more conversations as a go-to advisory firm for the M&A space. That for me is success. We're on the track to do that. But if more and more conversations, we are seen as one of the go-to firms in conjunction with some of the other well-known firms, that for me is success. That's really what we want to do. We're still in the early stages of building this business. We're only 7 years in. So roll forward 3-5 years, will be 10, 12 years in. We're still a baby in the M&A terms. And so just to be in the conversation is what we want to be. I think we're there now, so we want to be leading that conversation in 5 years' time. That's success.
How do you feel like you can do that? How do you feel like you can get there?
More deals.
Yeah.
I think the more deals you do, the more credibility you have, the more confidence you have, the more opportunities come your way because you've got sector experience, etc. The more people you meet along the way, the more referrals you get, the more you get to know the private equity community, the more deals come your, it kind of spirals from there, which is why I've very much been focused on the last 7 years around, obviously money is important. We want to make money, but it's more around just building up our credentials. The more deals you do, the easier it is to sell stuff, and the more stuff you get, crudely. So it's about doing deals. That's basically what it is. The more deals we do, the more confidence we get, the more credibility we get, the more we will be in conversations.
And obviously doing deals and getting deals done it's becoming harder and harder at the moment. How are you finding the market at the moment?
Yeah, I think obviously we're just, as time of recording, we've just got a ceasefire on the Iran war. So, but fortunately, it hasn't, touch wood, seemed to have had a detrimental impact on the M&A journey or M&A deals, in the same way that other, events have happened like Trump's tariffs last year seemed to slow everything down for a good few months. The market's tough because external environment is tough generally. Buyers are spending more time doing due diligence, and therefore deals are taking longer. The longer a deal takes, the less momentum you have, the more chance that trading is poor, and the more risk there is a deal falling over. Buyers are less willing to take risks, so there's more risk on the seller, multiples coming down. So generally the market is tougher than it was 5 years ago, particularly pre-COVID. But there's lots of deals. There's lots of active sellers and there's lots of active buyers, and there's lots of private equity money. And while there's private equity money, there'll always be deals. And so it's definitely not doom and gloom. Our pipeline is good. We're seeing lots of stuff. We had a couple of deals fall over recently, not because of external environments, because of other factors. But yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic for the next 12 to 18 months.
So as a final question, we like to ask a talent at the top question, and it's about advice. For those that are maybe at the start of their career that want to get to the top, to be talent at the top, what's one piece of advice that you could give them now?
I think, can I answer with two?
Go for it. Because
one of them, when I was in my internship at Lehman Brothers, I was talking to one of the managing partners, and he said something to me that's always stuck with me. At the time, I didn't really understand it, but now I really do. And it was always think or ask how you're adding value. Whatever you're doing, even if you're making a cup of tea for someone, how are you adding value? Because then that helps drive the right behaviors. So even when you're doing an audit and you're following last year's file and your tickets, why are you doing it? What is what you're doing adding value to the client or to the opportunity? And I think that I've really taken that with me, and I've really tried to do that. That's not necessarily going to get you to the top, but I think it's quite a good sort of piece of advice. In terms of getting to the top, I go back to what I said before. It's communication. Yeah, it's talking and talking and talking, and to a degree playing the game where you need to, but having conversations around progression and promotion. What do I need to do? Not necessarily to get to the next level, but the level after. Let's write it down. Tell me what the things are, because I want to work on them. Give me some examples of things I can do. Once you've had those conversations, you know what they are. If you can then demonstrate those and evidence those, it makes that conversation much easier about that progression, that promotion. Because you said I need to do these 5 things. I've done these 5 things. Here's the evidence of it. And I think we're not very good at having those conversations or trying to sell ourselves when we have with people. So I think sell yourself, open and honest communication with partners, managers, always thinking about what's next, always thinking about what you can do to get to the next level.
Brilliant.
And add value.
There you go. Yeah. You heard it from Nick Wallis. I appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having me.